Welcome back, RotoBallers. I'm Pierre, and I'm here once again to help you with some start-sit advice for Week 7. A lot of teams on bye, you may have heard, and so fewer and fewer quality options. I'll give you some of my favorite players that you absolutely must start based on matchups, and of course, some guys that I think you should sit. So let's get into it and start with somebody that probably is a must-start most weeks. But Michael Pittman, I know some people are probably a little concerned for two reasons. First of all, coming off a down game, only 2 catches for 35 yards. That's not going to get it done. And then T.Y. Hilton just so happened to be back the same week. So now there's some concern. Is Hilton going to take over as wide receiver 1? Because Hilton actually put up some decent numbers before leaving with injury. So 2 things I'll say here, and that is no and no. So first of all, I'm not too worried about Hilton because, well, he did leave with injury, and it was kind of sounding like he's 50-50 to play in Week 7. Haven't heard the latest update because it's still Friday, and so we don't know what his final situation is going to be. I think he will play, but again, could be limited, could be injured again. This is a guy on the wrong side of 30 who has had numerous injuries over the past couple of seasons. So I'm not overly concerned, but even so, I don't think Hilton is necessarily the wide receiver 1 because Pittman is the guy who should see the larger target share going forward. Hilton will still do what he does, and that's play the deep threat role. But again, I think Pittman is still the guy there. And so not worried about Hilton in that sense. Also not worried too about last week because, again, it was Houston. Yet Jonathan Taylor went off and had a huge game because they really didn't need to pass. Okay, they just didn't. So, of course, that's why Pittman didn't get many targets. Going to be probably a different situation going against San Francisco. Not that that's necessarily going to be a higher scoring game, but we're going to see the Colts at least throw the ball more than 20 times. So I think Pittman will be fine. And the 49ers, yeah, they have a good defense, but it's not a lockdown defense on receivers. They're kind of middle of the pack here against wide receivers. So I think Pittman is a guy you absolutely keep in your lineup. Don't worry about all those things I just mentioned. Stick with him. Also, don't worry about Marquez Callaway, not that you were in the first place, because most people had either forgotten about him, ditched him, or just never had him in the first place. After the first couple of weeks, he did nothing, and we were calling that preseason game that he was full of highlights, that one preseason game. Everyone was just calling that a fluke or a joke, but you know what? Starting to put together some highlights in the regular season, the last couple of weeks going deep and getting touchdowns. I know the Hail Mary was pretty much fluky, all right, but still, this is somebody who now saw 8 targets last week. He's becoming the main receiver in New Orleans, and of course, injuries to teammates always help. Deontay Harris in the last game did leave early, and all this week hasn't been practicing. So again, you're going to check on game time to see if Harris plays. If Harris doesn't play, Callaway has a chance to have a huge target share. But even besides that, if Harris does play, it doesn't matter. I think Callaway is the number 1 receiver in this offense. Michael Thomas is not coming back, and he's not coming back real soon, which is also why I recommend Callaway as a guy to acquire in trades right now. If you look for that article on RotoBaller, talk about trade targets for this week, I like Callaway because, again, even though this isn't your Saints from last year, the year before, your Drew Brees Saints, Jameis Winston has a better deep ball than Drew Brees. We know that at this point, and that's what Callaway does, right? He's going to be that home run hitter. No, he's not going to put up 10 catch games. He's just not. Okay, but we're looking for a wide receiver 3 type here, somebody who could have a big game on a weekly basis. And going against Seattle this week, you know he can have a big game. That is still one of the worst secondaries in the league. So I really like Callaway this week, and I like him going forward. And I feel the same way about Nico Collins. We don't really have a body of work here. He's a guy who missed 3 weeks, again, as a rookie, came in, didn't do much, had 1 catch the first couple of games, then left with injury. Well, his first full game back, he was used a little bit, got 6 targets, had 4 catches, 44 yards, nothing too exciting. To Texans, you can't be too excited anyways. But the fact is that he now has a really good chance to become the number 2 target in that offense. And I know you're thinking, well, who cares? It's the Texans. Davis Mills, is just not showing too much other than that 1 game, which is looking like an outlier. But Tyrod Taylor actually should be back in the next couple of weeks, and that brings some hope, especially for someone like Collins, who can be a field stretcher and get those deep balls. So if you look towards the second half of the season, especially once you go past their bye in a couple of weeks here, I believe coming up they get after this week, they'll get the Rams, they get the Dolphins, and then they have their bye. So second half of the year, I'm really intrigued by Collins. So again, also somebody you consider maybe scooping up off waivers if he's available, because we should just see his role and his production increase over time. But for this week, I do like him because going against the Cardinals, and we know the Texans will have to throw the ball a lot. The Cardinals, for that reason, they're always up, and so teams have to throw it, giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers, believe it or not. So a good chance for some volume here and not any competition beyond Brandon Cooks. So think about Collins as kind of a sneaky flex play, or in a deep league, you can put him in as a receiver. Now, who don't I like in week 7? Jakobi Meyers, I mean, is he ever going to score a touchdown? Apparently not. We thought he had one last week and then got called back from penalty. That's kind of tough luck, but still, I think we can say that for some players, it just, I don't want to throw Julio Jones in the conversation there, okay? But still, there's just some players that just don't seem to find the end zone. And Meyers, for whatever reason, it's not lack of height, it just doesn't happen for him. He has limited upside. I mean, already in this offense, this isn't a heavy pass offense to begin with. So I just don't think that he brings enough of a ceiling. In PPR leagues, look, he's fine as your third receiver. I've said that you can start him in certain matchups. This is not a matchup to start him with. Believe it or not, the Jets, yes, the Jets, are limiting wide receivers to the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game. If there's one thing they're doing, it's not letting the receivers go off. They're letting the running backs go off. Okay, but again, this is a team, an offense here, the Patriots, that is primarily run first, and a defense that is going to let you run first. It's going to be a big game for Damian Harris. It's not going to be a big game for Jakobi Meyers. And we say, well, he can, score a touchdown, and then that'll boost, his mediocre numbers. But it just won't, because he will never score, apparently, ever. And then one more must sit here, Tyler Lockett. Look, if there's a guy to worry about and to sell in trade talks, it's Lockett. Obviously, Russ Wilson being out, that hurts the whole offense, but it especially hurts Lockett. That connection they have was something special. It's just not happening. As you saw last week with Geno Smith, he only caught 2 of his 7 targets. So again, it's not like he wasn't getting looks. He just not connecting there. So Lockett is going to struggle the next couple of weeks, but also he has done what Tyler Lockett has done in the last couple of years, which is go absolutely insane early in the season and make everybody think that he's going to dominate fantasy and then just for some reason disappear. He might reemerge later in the season after Wilson comes back, right? The last couple of weeks, which he's done before too. But for the time being right now, you just can't like his upside. He is so dependent on that deep ball, which I know Geno Smith is physically capable of doing, but is not going to get that connection like he had with Russell Wilson. And it's not really a great matchup this week either. Look, Tyler Lockett was one of the best receivers, fantasy players of all in the first 2 weeks. But in the last 4 weeks, he hasn't even been a top 40 wide receiver for PPR purposes. 4 weeks straight. Okay, is that included with Russ? And now we have no Russ. So I just think it's time to put him on the bench because really the upside is just not there anymore. All right, guys, must start, sit, wide receivers. Do this every week for you. Try to help you with lineup advice. You want the best advice, of course, you always go to RotoBaller. Check out RotoBaller.com. Check us out on Twitter, latest news updates, and our rankings, which are constantly being updated to help you win. All right, good luck.